Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Riverdale, Season 7, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, let's pick up where we left off with Archie in Episode 4, where obviously his Uncle Frank is here, and his Uncle Frank has been here for a couple days and is trying to put Archie back on the straight and narrow, making him apologize to his mom. And it's like, do you think your dad would be proud of the person you are right now? And it's like, no, your dad would actually be disappointed. So has him talk to his principal about getting his grades back up, trying to get him on the basketball team, but Archie's kind of reluctant about that. So it's like, all right, don't worry about it. You're going to be the water boy at the very least, which I'm like, why are you pushing Archie down this path? And his mom's kind of okay with it. Then also making him a job, because Archie's dad promised to his dad was like, if something happens to me while I'm away, you're the man of the house. And he hasn't really been doing stuff. But it's also like, you're a teenager, but at the same time, it is like your mom is alone, your dad's going, you have to kind of step up, which, you know, Archie kind of had to do a lot of that regardless in the original timeline too. He never really kind of had like his teenage years were strife and messed up regardless, you know? So he never had like a normal teenage life because there was just always one thing after another in Riverdale. And then he's experienced a lot more. I mean, him and his classmates experienced a lot more than any normal teenager would. So there's that angle to it. But I immediately was kind of like, feels like Uncle Frank's kind of being a dick. Because Uncle Frank, obviously in the original Riverdale, he was like, no, I'm here to help you. He did put, like, yes, he had his own demons, he had his own issues, but he was always kind of that guiding hand for Archie, trying to be everything like, yeah, he wasn't as like straight-laced as Fred. He definitely has a lot more issues than Fred did. But the fact of the matter is he was always that guiding hand to Archie. He was never like a douche. In this regard, it feels like he is. But I could never fully tell whether like he's being a dick just because that's who he is, or whether this was some like Mr. Miyagi, like things aren't what you think they are, wax on, wax off type of thing of like, oh, you think I'm being a dick? But it's because I am like doing this dickery stuff, being a douchebag, just to kind of push you to be in a position where you will better yourself and, you know, pushing you so you automatically correct yourself. That's what I'm curious about. And obviously Julian, because Julian's the pompous douchebag that he is, because he keeps pushing it and more and more and more and more, where it's just like, oh, you work here? Oh, I'm gonna throw this cup on the floor. Pick it up, water boy. Oh, you work at Pops, you're giving, oh, well, fill up the gas tank and like put air in my tires. Oh, you missed this much. Archie tried to be reasonable. All right, just bring it back tomorrow, today, and I'll fix it right up. It's like, good. Also, go get me a drink. It's like, no, get it yourself. It's like, because Julian thinks he's better than everyone regardless, and especially in the position that they're in right now. Especially in the situation he's in right now, he feels like he's even more so above Archie than he normally would be. There's already been beef between him and Archie about the whole Veronica situation. You know, this just made Julian feel like he's insecure and he's overcompensating. I mean, maybe it's not even just insecurity. I mean, there might be a little bit of that there, because he kind of embraces the Blossom family a lot more than Cheryl did. Cheryl is there, but like obviously being a Blossom comes with its own challenges, especially for her circumstances, which we'll talk about later. But I think she doesn't, like, from Cheryl's always had a little bit of that, like, I'm, like, Queen Bee, like, kind of, like, inflated ego, but she doesn't have it as much here. It definitely feels like Julian has it the most. Because I guess that's almost supposed to be the inverse of, like, Jason wasn't as much like that as Cheryl was in the original Riverdale, so I think now the roles have kind of gotten reversed where she's not as much like that. But that's also part of, like, we've seen Cheryl grow. Like, yes, there's still a little bit of that Cheryl we met at the very beginning of the series, but she's definitely grown and matured in a lot of ways, and obviously still kind of stunted in others. I mean, once again, they've all been kind of stunted in their own regards. But either way, but yeah, Archie popped off on Julian, and instead of Frank handling it, his mom was like, no, I'm going to be the one to handle it. And she talks to him, and Archie opens up about why he wasn't interested in being the basketball team, because for him, it's like, this is a thing me and Dad used to do all the time. Because even Pops is like, yeah, like, he's like, it'd be nice if you were on the basketball team like your dad. Your dad was like the best the best rebound person we had. So, but it's for Archie, it's like, by playing basketball, all he can do is like feel like it'll just be that opening that wound in his chest all over again. Because it's like, this is something me and Dad did together, and if I do it, like all I'm gonna do is think about like, I wish Dad was here to see me. And also, what if I'm out there in the court and I disappoint? Like, what if I'm not good enough? But for his mom, it's like, no matter what your uncle said, he shouldn't have said it, but your dad will always be proud of who you are. So it'd be nice. I'm sure your dad would really love it. And I would really love it if you were out there in the court and you had your dad's number, kind of carrying on that legacy. Because if it's something you love and care about, give it your all. And I'll also get Frank to back off, because I think eventually it did kind of get to her like, yeah, you are putting a lot on Archie. Yes, he's supposed to be the man in the house, but he still also should be able to live his life as a teenager before worrying about the adult stuff. Like, because I think, especially in her mind, it's like, okay, take care of me, but it's like, no, I'm the adult. The reason why I asked Frank here in the first place is to take care of Archie. Archie, it's not supposed to be fully on Archie to take care of me. I'm the adult in the situation. He's a teenager. I mean, I know she's felt that same way in the original Riverdale as well. Like, she wanted Archie just to live Archie's life and not necessarily be, bound by looking after her, So ultimately, Archie just joined the basketball team, and he tells his Uncle Frank, I did this for me, my dad, and my mom, not for you. And Frank just smiles. That's why I'm like, I don't know if you were a dick on purpose. Like, once again, if this was like some Mr. Miyagi stuff. I'm not saying Mr. Miyagi's a dick, but like, like I said earlier, wax on, wax off. It's not what you think it is. You think it's one thing when in actuality it's not. I don't know if Frank was doing, I guess another way to look at it is I'm Jedi mind, reverse psychology type of stuff. I don't know. It feels like that might have been the case, the way he was smiling. Like, good. I needed you to come to this on your own because I needed you to make this choice. Like, you've been so flippant and just accepting it, but I want to see you grow and persevere from this and kind of show me who you really are, Archie. And now I'm seeing your true character, because he's been watching Archie for the past couple of days. I don't know. Once again, maybe I'm giving Frank too much credit and he is just kind of being a dick. That could just as much be plausible. So there's that. Then we have the situation with Cheryl, and she returns the book to Tony, and obviously it was kind of like she kind of referenced like, oh yeah, these two women with these gorgeous figures being together, and even Tony was like, oh, gorgeous figures and everything. It's like, yeah, she's not quite there yet, but Tony, because what was it? Cheryl had the whole Vixen thing, so she was putting it back together, and she's like, yeah, I would invite you, but I know being a cheerleader isn't really your thing. And Tony shows up and rocks the house. Evelyn, I love, was kind of like, yeah, wait, you don't know the tryouts are, and she's like, are you the captain? So shut up, which I thought was so manipulative of Cheryl. It's also so messed up that you use your power as captain to get your way. Because the fact of the matter is, because didn't Tony try out when she originally joined, like when she started going to Riverdale High, like when her and the other serpents got moved there from the south side, like didn't she try out then too? Because I know Veronica did, like when she first got to Riverdale, but I want to say Tony did as well. I think she was part of the Vixens, wasn't she? But it just felt like, oh, you're using your power and position to like let Tony perform while you're like ogling her. I mean, I get it, but I'm also like, oh, that feels a little weird that you're using your position as captain just as an excuse to see the girl that you like popping and strutting. It felt kind of like, oh, it feels a little abuse of power-ish. But it's like, oh, cool, Tony, you're a part of the team. It's like, but what about the rest of the tribe? Shut up, Evelyn. Also, I love it. It took me a hot minute to figure out where I recognize. Because I was looking at Evelyn, I was like, what? Why does that actress look familiar? And then when she was sitting down talking to Cheryl one-on-one, I was like, oh my God, I know who you are, Evelyn, from the cult. Oh my God, wasn't it called The Farm or whatever? I want to say that was season 4, but maybe that was a season 3 storyline. Because I know the Gargoyle King was the season 3 storyline, but I was like, wasn't The Farm the season 4 storyline? Could that not happen at the same time? Because I think that storyline got concluded in season 5, because obviously season 4 got cut short because of the pandemic. But I want to say, like, wasn't it season 4 of that storyline? I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And I was like, that didn't even click in my head. I also appreciate that when Tony showed up, the first person to kind of wave to her was like Mitch, and I was like, oh, that makes sense because of like the Fangs connection and the fact that Tony is helping out with the pregnancy thing, was kind of there to support them and help them. So it makes sense. But I I mean, the rest of the team, the moment Tony got, like, joined, the rest of the team was, like, ecstatic for her, too. So it's like, yeah, but it was just kind of nice Mitch being the first one to smile. Like, oh, hey, Tony, you know, type of thing. Only other, I mean, obviously the person that was the most excited was Cheryl, like, just so happy. But then Evelyn, she's like, oh, yeah, I have no issues with Tony being black. My issue is, like, she's total Leslie. But, like, for, like, it's because a multitude of things. One, Cheryl shut that down immediately. She's like, shut up, shut your foul mouth, don't you put that on Tony. I would never allow something like that on the team or whatever, yada, 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 so on and so forth. Cheryl was being very, for one, protective of Tony, but also protective of herself because she hadn't really defined it yet, but she knows that's kind of in the lane she is. And so she kind of got defensive for not only Tony, but also Evelyn. And Evelyn wanted to prove, I mean, this world or the original, Evelyn's up to her shady business, but Evelyn wanted to try and prove that Tony was, so found the book and was trying to prove who she was. But Tony, you know, ultimately finds out from Evelyn all that Cheryl said, and it's like, yeah, like, I don't need you defending me or trying to, like, hide who I am, because for her, that's a smack against me, because I am who I am. I've never felt ashamed of who I am, and I don't need you trying to defend me, because you trying to defend me is you trying to, like, hide who I am. And it's like, you're asking me not to be me, you know? And especially because she had that conversation with Lizzo, which even Lizzo was like, yo, that's a red lollipop even I'd want to give a lick to. I'm like, hey, yo. But she was like, she's putting so much time into Cheryl because she really likes Cheryl, but she also wants Cheryl to be comfortable with herself. Like I said, that was always my, like, pushback a little bit, just because I'm like, you should let someone come to them being who they are in their own time frame. But it's also like, if you don't take this leap now, because if she didn't do what she did, Cheryl would have taken that opportunity to try and run away with Archie. So, you know, and she makes Cheryl kind of confront who she is. It's like, okay, and she's like, I think I like girls. It's like, do you think or do you know? And it's like, I do, and I know. It's like, I think I like you. It's like, do you think or do you know? And she's like, I know. And it's actually really sweet and so adorable to see Cheryl so, like I don't even want to say the term modest, but, like, bashful, like, kind of like that. But it be, you know, because it's like, I mean, maybe I just don't remember. I'm like, she's never been the bashful type. You know, even, I'm trying to remember, like, when her and Tony first started, like, getting close and eventually started dating, like, was that a thing? I don't remember that being a thing with Heather either. To be fair, she was an adult by the time, obviously, her and Heather had their history, but even, like, in season 6, like, when they're adults, so it's a little bit different. Because that was, like, one of her earliest loves that kind of, like, got stomped on because of her mom, but Cheryl's a lot more willing to embrace who she is now, and we kind of find out more about what that stems from in this reality. And I don't remember if that was part of the original story. We know her mom kind of stomped all over that in the original Riverdale and everything, but timeline and everything. But I don't know if it was for the same reasons, because she has an aunt, Carol, who's gay. But the problem is that her mom pushed her away, and she can live somewhere else. And she's a writer, but she gets to be happy and be herself. And Cheryl wants to kind of be like that, and is afraid she never could. Once again, that's what the whole Archie thing was about. She thought she'd have to adhere to her parents and be like, live this lie, put on this role, and kind of live that, you know. And that's what the whole Archie thing was about. And Tony, maybe because I know her grandmother had issues with her dating Cheryl because Cheryl's a Blossom, and the Blossoms and the Topazes have their history. But I couldn't remember if, like, I brought this up previously. I couldn't remember if her grandmother had issues with it or whether it was her parents. Because I know she lives with her grandmother in the original timeline and everything. Obviously back when she was in high school. But, like, her parents didn't approve of who she was because she always liked girls. Her parents kicked her out, and she lives with her grandma. She even says, like, hey, my grandma is okay with me. Not okay, but accepts me for me for the most part. I guess meaning she still has her reservations, but she's still a lot more accepting of it. I'm sure that's going to be complicated because of the Cheryl thing on the twofold front. Not only is Cheryl white, it's also, like, the fact is that she's a Blossom, so it's like a twofold of, like, she's white, that's an issue. She's from not one of the most prominent family in Riverdale, so that's going to come with its issues as well. So we'll see. You know, I could just definitely see that becoming an issue, that they could definitely end up having a very Romeo and Juliet-esque relationship, as Romeo and Juliet were referenced this episode. So I think it also helps to not feel as alone at the school about it, because not only does she have Tony by her side, she also found out about Kevin and Clay, so it's like, right, I'm not about to put their circumstances on blast, so I think it makes that a little easier. I wonder will they end up becoming, because they became pretty close as the series like got later and later, if I remember correctly, Kevin and Cheryl, so like maybe we can kind of rekindle that aspect in this time frame as well. But Evelyn is no longer the top of the pyramid anymore. Now it's going to be Tony, and it's like, hey, Evelyn, if you want to, you can leave. But the moment Evelyn turned around, no one else on the team is kind of really batting too much of an eye, because it's like, yeah, the rest of the team supports Tony being at top, and it's like, yeah, like just Cheryl flexing her queen bee status, and the two of them kind of doing some lip locking later on, which is it's cute to see, and it's beautiful to see them kind of be where they are, which is like, oh, that's neat. Once again, I had to go back to the point of what are the present day relationships going to look like? I mean, once again, like, who knows how much Riverdale is going to change once Tabitha's done what she's done. So a lot of these relationships might solidify because things might be different. Like, there might be, because Mitch never dies, her and Fangs might be together. Like, there's a Kevin and Clay thing, which that could still solidify, even though, previously it was Kevin and Moose. So, like, stuff like that might end up happening. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see. And like I said, I just worry because I know because of the time frame and everything, and because of the respective circumstances, that's going to get uber complicated. So, but all the while that's happening, we also catch up with Betty, and because she wants to talk to Veronica about. It's like, right, what's sex like? And Veronica opens up and it's like, right, I've never gone all the way with a boy, which the fact that she specified that made me go like, oh, so yeah. I mean, because I think she's been pretty clear about like her sexuality being like, yeah, like, I mean, I think she's going, I don't know if I was reading too much into it because it sounded like she was saying like, oh, I've gone all the way with a girl, just never a boy. I was like, oh, interesting. Because she was pretty much like very open, like she's very open with the whole sexuality element and stuff like that. So I don't know, like I said, I don't know if that was me reading too much into it. So it's like, but yeah, I'm still a virgin in that regard. So, but it's like, oh, you're so sexy. But she's like, you don't have to equate sex and sexy. So I'm going to help you out, Betty, kind of like sex it up, and gave her some lingerie, which obviously like Betty's very like, kind of like, I don't know, makes me feel weird or feel embarrassed. It's like kind of embrace it more. Well, she admits to Veronica, like, hey, the person I'm into is Archie, which Veronica has her complicated feelings about. It's like, yeah, her and Jughead were vibing, but yeah, that has been, severe kibosh has been put into that. So it's still that thing of Archie's the one that kind of got away in her regard. And so we're back to, I mean, once again, classic Archie, Veronica, Betty love triangle, but also even where things kind of were before all of this, before this new timeline and circumstance, because Veronica was still kind of longing after Archie after everything else, So, and the sad thing is, like, Veronica's listening in on the two of them talking when, like, Betty tried to ask him out on a date. Obviously, he's dealing with everything with his Uncle Frank. Betty initially thinks it's an excuse, but Veronica's like, no, it probably is the truth. But you could see that look on Veronica's face when it didn't work out, because there was a part of her, like, that means there's still a chance for me and Archie. Like, it's still that thing of like, right, as long as nothing like solidifies, like happens, then it's all good. And it's that complicated thing of, because Betty doesn't know that Veronica still holds a torch for Archie. And so for her, it's like, she's willing to go to her for advice. And so Veronica's like, yeah, well, let's just go hang out with some Stonewall Prep guys and have a good time, which I'm like, oh, those douchebags. And I wondered if it was going to be some douchebags that we got to know. I thought it would be some familiar faces from Stonewall Prep, but it ended up not being, at least I don't think so. But Betty wasn't really vibing because she didn't get the butterflies, and especially because she's seeing Archie outside and he's seeing her inside. Like, it's just, I mean, I don't know if he really saw, I think he was looking at a direction, so I think he saw her, but he might have just been so busy, maybe he didn't. But, yeah. Betty kind of talks about like nothing kind of going away with how she feels about Archie, and also talks about the Peep show she gets where it's like, right. And then Veronica's like, whoa, wait a minute. You get to see Archie like, do its, in its room, and it's like, yeah, our windows are like across from each other, so we see everything. And Veronica wants to see the Peep show, and it's like, oh my God, and kind of referencing Rear Window. And I love Betty's like, at least he was trying to catch a murderer. We're just peeping patties, and she was so embarrassed, but Veronica loved it. It's like, yeah, but I mean, Archie probably wouldn't even mention it because he's too embarrassed or whatever. And then Archie walks up and it's like, oh, can I talk to you alone, Betty? And Veronica's just like, yeah, go ahead. I'll talk to you later, Betty. And Archie, keep up the good work, because she's like, oh, his bulging muscles. But yeah, like, it's like, oh, I saw you, Betty. She's like, what? I have no idea what you're talking about. He's like, no, and I liked it. And she's like, what? It's like, yeah, like maybe, I'm in my bedroom most nights, and she's like, yeah, I'm in my bedroom around the same time, so maybe we could, yeah. I'm like, oh boy. And so they kind of put on a strip show for each other. And the moment it is happening, I'm like, the doors aren't locked until like someone's going to bust in on you. Right when they're getting to the hot and steamy part is when Uncle Frank and Hal respectively bust in on them. So that's where the episode ends in that regard. So yeah, that's not going to be too good. I mean, you've been in a better place with your family, but that's probably going to dig you into a hole. Betty will probably get way more trouble than Archie would. He will still get in trouble, but probably not to the extent that Betty will. Not even just because of her dad. Her mom will probably kind of rip into her about that. We'll have to wait and see. Because immediately I was thinking too, I was like, were there locks on those doors to begin with? That's why I was like, probably didn't think to lock them. I mean, what made them decide to come up respectively? It makes me wonder, were they outside looking up and seeing this, and that's what made them bust in? Like, why would you suddenly bust into their respective rooms being like, what, basically even going like, what the hell is going on? They knew something was up. So I'm wondering, they had to be outside seeing something like for them to bust in the way they did. But I brought this up earlier. I was like, are there no locks on those doors? I was like, did bedroom doors not have locks on them in that time frame? Or, I mean, this was their first time doing this, so they probably got so excited they didn't think about locking their doors. I mean, obviously this is also a time frame where no one locked their doors, but that's more so about like the front doors to a house, never like bedroom doors. So I don't know if I'm reading too much. I could have sworn like there's an apartment building I lived in a couple years back. I want to say maybe I'm misremembering. I could have sworn one of them didn't have locks on their bedroom doors, if I remember correctly. Maybe like only the master bedroom did, but none of the other rooms did, maybe? I don't remember now. It's been so long. Either way, so like I said, I could have just easily been like reading too much into that. But putting all that aside, moving on to our next and final story point is the whole thing with Jughead. Obviously, the article that kind of went out about comics and obviously specifically Attack on Pep comics. But then we had this, I wasn't expecting the story to develop in what it did. I thought we'd focus more so on that of like, oh yeah, these kind of Attack on comics. That's going to be like a continuing overarching stuff that I think is specifically going to be tied to Jughead's storyline this season. But he ended up reading this comic by Pep Comics that is basically straight up taken like from one of his favorite authors. Was it Bradbury or something like that? And Jughead was like, oh, is this guy getting compensated? But his boss isn't really kind of skating around like, oh, we don't deal with plagiarism. We take offense to that word kind of getting tossed around. But Jughead found Brad and was like, yo, you know that they've not only taken this comic, but like 8 of your novels or whatever, and basically bit them off and made them into comics. You should not necessarily have to sue. I don't want Pep Comics like severely in debt and kind of have to go under because of that, but I want you to be able to be fairly compensated as, you know, the writer and stuff like that, which interesting timing, writer strike and everything. Very, very interesting timing. But either way, Brad ends up confronting the guy and it's like, all right, so going forward, your name will be included in all future copies of these comics we put out. And you'll be getting like some like, you know, adaptation fee, like basically since we're adapting your stuff into these comics, we'll kind of label it as adaptations and you'll get rights to it. And even Jughead's trying to talk to him and like, yeah, you'll be able to get someone else to kind of adapt some of your stories or whatever, and being like, oh, a young writer like you. Because we learned a little bit more about Jughead in this regard, talking to Brad, where it's like Jughead opens up about why, his dad, FP's not around. I didn't know if they'd even bother going into it, but it's like FP's not dead in this timeline or anything. It's just he left because he's the number one suspect in a bank robbery, so his dad's off somewhere, and, he's kind of been on his own since. I mean, obviously, we know very similar circumstances to where we had, that's why Jughead was staying in like a train car or whatever. Just like, obviously at the beginning of the series, he was staying at like a drive-in movie theater. But either way, Brad was telling him like, hey, you should adapt this into, you should write a short story about it. And he was going to get Brad to like read through it. And I was nervous initially because I'm like, are we going to have, let me guess, Brad, like, because of this whole conversation, Brad's going to end up taking the story and he's going to end up pretending like it's his own. I was like, that's going to be what happens, isn't it? Especially because of the Stonewall Prep thing. Once again, that's what happened to Jughead's grandfather. So I didn't even think about it at the time, but I was like, I wonder if that's the parallel they're going to try and go for here. But Jughead ended up stealing a manuscript that was written by Brad, and he was like, oh my god, this is so great, you need to get this adapted. But he's like, no, you stole from me? You're just as bad as Prep Comics, get out. And so my mind is like, okay, so is he acting like that because yes, you returned it and everything, but is it because I'm wondering, is he stealing from other people? Well, because actually Jughead did the exact same thing, didn't he? Like he was going to, when he had his writer's block, if I remember correctly. Wasn't that in season 5? Maybe that was season 6? I want to say that was season 5. Wasn't he going to do that in season 5, but he ultimately ended up not doing it? Because, I mean, like I said, it was done to his grandfather. Like, someone else made a whole bunch of success off of his grandfather's book. But that's why I was wondering if this guy is that type of guy. Is he stealing other people's work? So is that why he never legally came after Pep Comics before Jughead came around? Because he didn't want to draw too much attention, but he saw a money-making opportunity. So now, I don't know, it's just like, I mean, also, he might not be a comic person, so like, it probably really went severely under the radar, because maybe Pep Comics isn't as big, and so Brad was completely unaware of what was kind of happening. I mean, that type of stuff can just slip under the radar for you. I don't know. I don't know what to fully make of that circumstance. So I'm curious to see if that storyline ends up going the way I think it is. Like I said, the whole aspect of Brad's actually stealing people's stories, and he's not actually a good guy, and he was going to do it to Jughead. That's why he got so upset with Jughead stealing that story, because it was someone else's story that he stole, and he didn't want to take the chance Jughead might find that out. I don't know, or maybe he's just very protective of his work, and he's just like, maybe Jughead will be able to help him kind of come out of his shell, and it's like, hey, let's put this work out here. It's great, it deserves to be out there. We'll have to wait to see where that storyline develops, especially when you tag in the very end of it, where one of the Doily ended up having his comic taken from him, which is Jughead's comic that he was about to put out, and his name's on it on the byline and everything. It's smack dab on the front cover. So, and the principal, or I think that was the principal, was like super happy about it, because he can use Jughead as the face of attacking the comics and stuff like that, like they have been. So I think he saw an opportunity to use Jughead in that regard. So we'll have to wait to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.